Welcome back to ESBR Boxing's YouTube channel. Delighted to be joined by Danny for another weekly preview. Danny, thank you for joining me. Just the one kind of event we got to talk about this week, but it's a very big one, and it's kind of nice that it's taking center stage because it's kind of maybe going to get more attention there. Chris Eubank Jr. versus Liam Smith in Manchester on Sky Sports. I know we've spoken about this offline before. Most people have had their kind of say on what they think about this fight, but give me your general thoughts on this fight and how you think it's going to go down on January 21st.
Yeah, I've said before, it's a great fight. Probably one of the best all British fights I can remember for the last few years, certainly. Just like such a good contrast in characters as well. I watched the Gloves Are Off that came out today, and just really good. Like nothing over the top, but you could just tell like a general, particularly the way of Smith, a genuine sort of sense of animosity, and Eubank just plays that sort of villain heel character so well. So I think that's added to it as well. And not that it needed it, because in the ring, I'm expecting a really good fight as well, really entertaining fight. I've said from the start, I think Smith's got a better chance than maybe the odds would suggest, and the closer the fight gets, the more and more I'm starting to favour Smith, just because, as I've said again, I've not been overly convinced with this sort of Eubank 2.0 under Roy Jones. It maybe could have been a style he could have learned if it was sort of taught to him at 22, 23, but at 33, as I say, I've not been convinced. I think the Williams fight, on paper, it's an impressive win, clear decision win. You've knocked him down a few times, but I think Williams, he probably got at the right time. Like, I think as if the Andrade fight took quite a lot out of him. So, yeah, really looking forward to it. Can't wait. Right on my doorstep as well, so can't complain.
Yeah, good stuff. I know you've done a big fight preview, which came out a couple of weeks ago. Please do check that out if you have the time. It's well worth. Danny and Eliot Grigg go into a bit more detail. Just one other question from me on this one, Danny. I think one thing that's for me one of the many things that's intriguing about this fight is the age that both fighters are. Eubank Jr. is 33, Liam Smith's 34. Do you think that the loser could retire?
Definitely a possibility. It's a long way back regardless. When Smith was asked that in the Gloves Are Off, he stopped short of saying, I will definitely retire if I lose, but you could tell by the way he was speaking that, I would imagine that's what'll happen. I know Eubank's got the rematch clause, and if it's a really, really entertaining fight and he loses, then maybe that last payday will be too much to sort of turn down. And I think the Conor Benn fight will always be there. I think that fight's still a massive fight, even if Eubank loses. So I think it's more likely that Eubank would carry on if he loses, given the rematch clause and the fact the Conor Benn fight would still be a huge payday for him. But I would imagine if Smith's beat, then he'll probably hang them up. Yeah.
We shall see. A very, very intriguing night and a nice big domestic fight to get us kicked off in 2022. As always, we're going to cover three fights in this show. A fight that I'm a big fan of, a fight I'm really looking forward to. Echo Esserman will face Chris Kongo on the undercards. A fight that's for the British and the Commonwealth titles. There's a couple of other belts on the line as well, which just kind of makes it bigger, means there's even more on the line. Echo Esserman 18-0, Chris Kongo 14-1 with that one defeat coming against Michael McKinson. I think it's fair to say, like, Esserman, the last couple of years, he's beaten good fighters. He's kind of quite rightly won those titles that he's got now. He's defending them once again. This is actually his third defense of the British welterweight title. Chris Kongo, I feel I'm a fan of Chris Kongo. I think he's a very good fighter. Faced Sebastian Formella last time out, but I just don't think I don't think we've seen him do enough for the amount of time he's been around, if that makes sense. He's been around quite a bit, had little periods of inactivity. I think that Michael McKinson fight was just such an awkward fight for him. It just wasn't. McKinson is such a tricky customer. So yeah, really intriguing one for this one. I want to get your thoughts on it as well as kind of what your prediction is. Who's the favourite in this fight? How you see it going down? What are your thoughts, Danny?
Yeah, at the risk of sounding like a boxer PR head, this is another really good fight. It feels as if Esselman's always in competitive fights. I think was it Samuel Anto he boxed in Manchester. I think that was in the Parker Joyce card, and he won well that night as well. So he's he's willing to fight the sort of best around in Britain. I think he's proven that. This is probably on paper one of the closest ones. Congo, you mentioned the McKinson loss. That did knock a bit of the wind out of the sails of his push. He was with Matchroom at the time, but came back well. The Formella one was decent win, decent performance. Didn't maybe beat him as conclusively as Conor Benn, but you can't take too much from that. In terms of predictions and who I'd maybe favour, I think you would have to make Esselman the favourite just because of the body of work. Been in sort of more tough fights and emerged on top, whereas in terms of Congo, you would say McKinson fight and the Formella fight are the only fights sort of in paper he was, you'd be really pushed and think he was in danger of losing, and obviously only won the Formella one. Esselman, getting on slightly. I think him and Congo are actually similar age, so you just wonder with that high work rate style, if maybe there's anything left or anything sort of depleted from that, if Congo could capitalise on it. But we've seen nothing to suggest that, so I would favour Esselman, but it's a really competitive fight without a doubt.
Yeah, it's a really tricky one. I just had a quick look at the odds, and Esselman is the slight favourite there. If we're doing predictions, I'm gonna disagree with you. I'm gonna edge towards Congo. So we'll see what happens on the night, but it's just a tricky one. I feel like one thing I would say is Congo 3-4 years ago was seen as a big prospect. He is 30 years old now. I think he had a decent win against Sebastian Formella last time out, but this is the kind of year in his career when we'll know what he's about and what he will achieve. He could potentially be in a fantastic position at the end of this year. He could be kind of world ranked, have belts around his waist, or he could just kind of turn into more of an opponent, if that makes sense, and be that guy who gets last minute fights prospects. I don't know. It's such a big year in the career of Chris Congo. But anyway, I think final point for me on that one is that we want to see more of these sort of fights. We want to see more of these British Commonwealth title fights and undercards where people like me and you are disagreeing on who's going to win, and it's a genuine 50-50 fight. We don't see enough of these sort of fights, and it's the sort of fights we should see if we're paying 20 quid for a pay-per-view. Final one for me, Danny. It's this fight kind of was a bit of a surprise to a lot of people. Former heavyweight champion Joseph Parker will fight Jack Massey. I was about to say cruiserweight Jack Massey, but he's obviously fighting at heavyweight in this fight. Joseph Parker, who we saw last time out against Joseph Joyce, got stopped towards the end of the fight. As we know, he's fought Dillian White, fought Anthony Joshua, fought Derek Chisora. He's still kind of fairly young for a heavyweight, Joseph Parker, but he's done quite a lot in his career. Jack Massey, some of the more general, casual boxing fans might not be too aware of. His record is 20-1, with that one loss coming to Richard Riakporhe, who's also on the undercard on Saturday night. But he's kind of faced a couple of faced some good fighters in his career. I feel like one thing about Jack Massey is he's never been on a big platform for a sustained amount of time, so he's never had kind of continued exposure. Is this just do you think this is going to be a fairly straightforward night's work for Joseph Parker? What do you think is going to happen here?
If he's got any ambitions of doing anything at the top of the heavyweight division, that it should be a relatively comfortable night's work for him. As you said, I've never felt like a sense of like confusion. It's like I almost had to do a double take when the fight was announced. Not that it's like a terrible, terrible fight. You've seen much bigger mismatches. It's just something about it didn't feel right. I know Massey had the IBO world title at cruiserweight. You would see him as like a British level fighter. I don't think that would be remiss to say. And then you factor that in. I know Parker is not like a monster heavyweight when you look at like a Fury or a Joshua or a Joyce, but he's a big heavyweight. He's a fully fledged heavyweight and always has been. So I think if Parker's anything, like his best, and that Joyce fight hasn't completely sort of taken everything out of him, then he should be like dealing with Jack Massey inside the distance and not dropping around, you would think.
Yeah, you would think so. I think it's Joseph Parker. He was only out in September, so I think it's good for him that he's back in the ring in January. Sometimes you see fighters take a loss, and that's it for a year. So considering 11 rounds with Joe Joyce sounds pretty grueling. So I think to do that and then have 2-3 weeks out of the gym, I imagine, and then back in and fighting in January. Obviously, training over Christmas, fair play to him. That's not an easy thing to do. I think one thing I'd say about Jack Massey is that what I'd be interested to know is if he is now a heavyweight and this is now his division. And the weigh-in's going to be fascinating as well, like where Massey weighs in and how kind of he looks at that weight. Or if Massey was just kind of approached and said, "Do you want to fight Joseph Parker?" Which I hope that's not happened, because whoever's doing that approaching should approach a heavyweight rather than someone who's significantly smaller. Final thing I just would say about Massey is that, as we're kind of mentioning, he's been around a while now, but he's not had a big fight, so you can't blame him for taking the opportunity. I think that if you carry on in your career and carry on and the big fights don't arrive, eventually you're going to kind of be willing to take a big risk. So I do understand it. Any more thoughts from you on that one, Danny? Is it one you're looking forward to, or not so much?
Oh, it's not a bad fight for third, fourth, fifth in the bill, whatever it's going to be. You know what I mean? Like if that was your co-main event, raising a few eyebrows, but imagine that would be, fourth before Riakpur Glowacki and then Esserman Congo, I think, or maybe it's Riakpur is the co-main. But that's not a terrible placeholder fight in a card. Just interesting to see what Sky do with Joseph Parker, or what the plan is. They've not got many heavyweights. The only two I can think of at any sort of level are him and Fraser Clark. Maybe if Okolie is to move over and move up, that'd be a very interesting fight. But it's just, what do you think? What would you like to see Parker do going forward if he does go through Massey?
It's a tricky one. I feel like Parker, he's fought high level guys, and I just don't think he's going to want to spend a decent amount of time at a rebuilding level, and I don't think he needs to rebuild. Joe Joyce beats him. That's okay. I just wonder if it's good for him to have that fight of facing, say, a top 25 guy before challenging another top 10 guy later in the year. I think that would be a good year for him. If he was able to achieve that. No names immediately spring to mind, to be honest. But I'm intrigued. I think I'm just kind of playing kind of fantasy boxing here, like Adam Kawanaki, maybe someone like that. I think another thing about Parker, if he's fighting on Sky, does he need to be fighting British guys? Because if he got a guy from New Zealand fighting a guy from Europe, is that going to go down well? Is that going to main event kind of the Manchester Arena? Probably not. So I think that's the other tricky thing. But Adam Kawanaki, that's someone that would appeal to me. I think that if you look at, kind of, if it's possible, like an Otto Wallin, I think Tony Yoka, I think those are the fights I would want to see personally. But it's tricky. But I know Park would fight anyone, but that's someone, that's the sort of year I would like him to have. How about yourself?
Yeah, it's just, you hit the nail on the head with the fact that he's a heavyweight who's been in big fights, so he'll be used to a certain size of purse. But I think with Parker, the opponent has to be, he's normally the B-side, isn't he, really, against like a Dylan White, a Joshua, Joe Joyce. But Sky have seemed to sign him as his own sort of entity and push him going forward. So as you said, it'll be interesting to see what they do with him. I love the Martin Okolie fight. I think that would be a great progression step, maybe for Okolie more so than Parker. I think it'd probably be a tough night for Parker. It's probably not going to happen now with the promotional aspect, but I think Daniel Dubois at the end of the year will be a really good fight. But aye, it'll be interesting.
Yeah, interesting. But look, it's the heavyweight division. There's so many fights out there. It's just a case of can we see them? And that's true with kind of Joseph Parker's level and the top level as well. We will see if it happens. All right, Danny, we'll round things off there. Chris Eubank Jr. versus Liam Smith, January 21st. Really exciting fight. Cannot wait for it. I think, yeah, sets us up both the rest of the year. Danny, thank you for your time. We'll speak to you soon, okay?
No bother, mate. Thanks.